This week on Overtime, we take a look at the women at the well, this incredible conversation with Jesus and the Samaritan women, and take a deep dive in what it looks like to live a life of truth and love. Let's get it.
Welcome to Center City Overtime, a weekly podcast where we take a little more time to dive into Sunday's message. And we're right in the middle of our Come and See series.
Did you see me? I toasted with the new Center City mug.
I like that. We do. We have two versions of the Center City mug.
You can buy them.
That one and not this one. But yeah, you can buy them.
You got to show up live, but in every one of our experiences, we have them for sale.
Yeah.
I've never plugged anything before. I thought that was a cool little plug. There you go.
We also have hoodies and t-shirts.
We do.
But, you know, that's not why we're here.
Nope.
Come and see our merch.
All over the place. This is what happens when we wait to record till after lunch.
Yep. Welcome to the madness. You preached on one of my favorite stories, the woman at the well. You could do a whole series on that interaction. But I love the way that you talked about this interaction between Jesus and the Samaritan woman in light of what we're talking about with Come and See. And I've never thought about before we were preparing this message that Jesus, who has every answer to everything in the world, every resource available, everything to offer her, he starts this interaction asking her for a drink of water. Will you talk about why that's so surprising and also effective?
Well, I think surprising because 2,000 years of church history is kind of almost erased the vulnerability of Jesus. Mm-hmm. We feel like somehow the vulnerability of Jesus reflects some kind of weakness. Well, Jesus isn't weak. He's not broken. There's not a flaw there. But because he, in that moment, decides to showcase a vulnerability because he's thirsty, mm-hmm. I think it teaches us that when we are vulnerable, people open up to the idea of the gospel. They open up to a conversation, even at its simplest form. And it's funny because we do this in almost every other walk of life. Like when it comes to our job, a lot of times we take the posture of vulnerability. When it comes to even sports, like we'll take a posture of vulnerability. But when it comes to the gospel, for some reason, our faith, we take this posture of perfectionism and hyper religiosity. I don't even know that's a word, but I'm kind of worked up, so I just made it up again. This hyper focus on everything that I know to be right and everything that you're doing that's wrong. And I think that turns the stomach of a lot of people when we approach them when it comes to this come and see mentality.
Well, I think a lot of us who have grown up in the church, we hear this word evangelism, which I think we've talked about it a little on the podcast in this series. This idea that like I need to go and I want to reach my neighbors. Like it comes from this great heart, but we put this pressure on ourselves to be experts. So like if I'm going to be someone who is telling the people around me about Jesus, then I need to know everything. Like I need to have everything to offer. And we put unnecessary pressure on ourselves because we're not supposed to have all the answers.
Yeah, and again, it's a little crazy because when it comes to almost everything else, to lend the phrase to other things, when it comes to almost everything else, we evangelize quite easily about anything. You know, your favorite TV show. How many times have you watched the TV show, got done with the TV show? It's not that you spent 16 weeks studying the director or the storyline or the plot changes or the characters. No, you pick up the phone almost immediately and text a friend, yo, you gotta watch this episode of Ted Lasso, or you gotta watch this episode of whatever show you watch, Grey's Anatomy or whatever, or Friends. I'm just coming up with shows now. Whatever the show is, like we have no problems with that form of evangelism. And at the core, what I love about this series is really so many of these people, really, it just becomes I just met Jesus. She just meets Jesus. Mm-hmm. He could be the Messiah. She doesn't even declare him the Messiah at that point. She eventually, it kind of is inferred. You have to come and see this man who has known all these things about me. She didn't take 6 years of seminary. Like there wasn't, 45 hours worth of some intense Bible training. Are those things bad? No, not at all. I love the idea that we long, like a natural response to a life transformation is an in-depth approach to discipleship and education, and I want to get there. But evangelism doesn't require a seminary degree. It just doesn't. It's just come and see. And that's why I've loved this series so much.
Yeah. And even to use that metaphor that you were just using, how often do I watch maybe 1 or 2 episodes of a TV show and I think like, I have no idea where this is going, but I think it's pretty good. So I'm going to tell my friends like, hey, you should watch this. I'll make that caveat sometimes. I'm 1 or 2 episodes in, but like I never feel like I have to complete an entire show before I decide if this is something that like I'm just interested in it. So like we don't have to know everything about God. We don't even have to have totally figured out what we believe about every single thing.
I'll go a step further. I actually think that when people have a legitimate life-changing experience with the Lord, you don't have to teach evangelism. I think the only time you have to spur people onto evangelism is when they've become so maturated in the faith that the things that God used to do that inspired and challenged and left them in awe, we've kind of grown used to. Mm-hmm. So it's not, oh my gosh, I've had this incredible experience, I want you to come and see. It's now, man, church was really good on Sunday. Where are we going to lunch? And I think that plays a large role in it. Because again, true evangelism, how many times have you heard someone gets transformed, rocked on a Sunday, or rocked in a small group, or rocked on a Wednesday night, or even at a job over a conversation, and within weeks they are bringing every one of their friends to that church or that small group or that Bible study, because again, it doesn't take education per se to step fully into evangelism.
Yeah. On the other side of that, like I think we've got some people who we do feel this pressure to say exactly the right thing, but then there's this quote, I think it was St. Francis, I'm not entirely sure. I used to have it in my AIM profile, if you can think all the way back to Instant Messenger. Preach the gospel, if necessary, use words.
Yes.
And so you made the point, like, yes, Jesus was demonstrating his vulnerability in asking her for something, but he also just simply opened his mouth and engaged in conversation. And a lot of times we will get to the point where we'll live out our faith, we'll pray for the people around us, but we never actually speak up. How do you take that first step?
Well, first of all, I hate that quote. I don't hate it. That's a strong phrase.
20-year-old Ashley is crushed right now.
Yes, your AIM profile. I would have pulled you out of my top 5. No, that was MySpace. Yeah, that's MySpace. Not that I hate the quote for the sake of the quote, because I like the quote, the intention behind it. But I do think that people have used it as an opportunity to excuse away the responsibility of opening your mouth and having a verbal witness. I say that because, it doesn't make sense in any other fabric of life. Like we really like a sports team, so I go out and I buy all the gear and I'm wearing all the gear, and someone says, hey, do you like the Charlotte Hornets? Why would you ask that? I don't know. That's a weird question to ask me. It just seems weird to me. The truth is that yes, our life should be a constant reflection of the love and the hope of God. There should be rivers of water that are, teeming from our relationship with the Lord, that draws people to the richness of faith that we have found. But if your life is lived in such a way that the glory of God is seen through it, eventually someone's going to have questions. I've noticed the way that you handled that. You seem to handle that with such control, or you seem to walking through a season that's so chaotic. You seem to have such peace, or for someone who's dealing with such loss, you seem to have such joy. What's the secret? What's going on? What's so different about you? Man, what a phenomenal opportunity to open your mouth and express the love that God has kind of bestowed upon us, like the beauty of a life connected to Him. But again, I think the further and further we are from the original Easter story, the more and more culture has become a little fragile, and we're afraid to some degree. I might get outcasted. I might get to use a modern term, canceled. I might lose friends.
People might think I'm weird. And yet, it's so funny because I have friends that are not believers and have the craziest beliefs. Just rocks and crystals and books that were written thousands of years ago,
and that say the craziest stuff. They have no problems explaining and kind of wanting to evangelize. But when it comes to the gospel, we forget it is that scripture that always is heavy on me. It's that it is the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. Right? Like, so the saints overcame because of the blood of the Lamb, but also they had to open their mouth. It was the word of their testimony. And I think ultimately, if they shut our mouths, if they cut us off, if they've convinced us that to say anything, it just costs too much, then we have stopped overcoming. There's no overcoming unless we've learned to use our mouth. So, the challenge I think that Jesus sets before us is say something. Say something, and it would be really good if you start from a place of vulnerability.
As he continues talking to her, it gets a little dicey. Not dicey, but he doesn't mince words.
Nope.
and so you spent a long time on Sunday talking about telling the truth in love. And because you were just at Fight Camp, which I know you're not supposed to talk about
Can't
Fight
talk
Camp.
about Fight Camp. Sorry, guys.
But we're about to talk about it. I don't like rules. So you talked about this boxing stance of needing to be at 10 and 2 and related that to the truth and to love, but I don't understand anything about boxing, so I'm going to let you explain that metaphor instead of trying to do it.
No, you did a pretty good job.
I want to stand up, but I know I won't be in frame.
So in the boxing world, boxers know that they have to keep their feet at 12 and 2.
12 and 2, not 10 and 2 is driving.
Driving is 10 and 2, yeah. Boxing is 12 and 2. And the right stance, what it allows you to do is not just to strike quickly, but also when you get struck, because you will get hit in boxing. Like, that's just the nature of it. When you get struck, your stance is strongest at 12 and 2. So scripture is relatively, really clear that the stance of our faith should be on truth and love. And Jesus, even in this example, uses really strong language. Like, I love his setup question, because the setup question is, go get your husband. And her response, her response, kind of Jesus just instantly went into, because you've had 5 husbands, and the one you're living with now is not currently your husband, which again, culturally at the time, is a huge no-no. But the challenge in that passage is he doesn't stop there. It's not just this issue of this cultural abnormity that she's living in. This is really like, oh, you're searching for love. And I want you to know that I know that you're searching for love, and the love you're searching for is here. Like, you can find it in me. And I've always loved this idea. So, even in Paul's writings, he's real quick to say that the maturation of the faith isn't truth. The maturation of the faith is truth and love. That as we grow to be more like Christ, we grow in truth and love. Because I, have young kids that sometimes they will, for lack of a better term, weaponize the truth against whoever they want, and then it gives them the excuse to be rude or crass or just a flat out jerk. And at moments, it seems like there's been seasons, and I won't say the church universal, but pockets of the church that have used truth almost like a weapon and haven't considered love, and what they end up doing is just cutting everybody and including themselves. So that balance of truth and love is critical.
Yeah, I feel like maybe as individuals, but also as kind of like clusters of friends, we as Christians in today's world, at least here in Charlotte, North Carolina, tend to either err on the side of we're good at truth, but lacking that love, and it's very much like, I'm going to call you on all of this stuff, and kind of, one of my professors put it as, are we countercultural or are we anti-cultural, and how do you live in that counter instead of anti place? But very I'm going to tell you everything you're doing wrong. But then there is another side of people that err on the side of being too loving, and I even hesitate to put it that way because I don't think it's actually love without any truth, of just wherever you are, it's okay, and we're going to celebrate whatever feels right to you in this time, and that comes from, just like the truth people are coming from a love for God's word, the love people are coming from a love for God's hospitality and wanting to show that So I guess to get to a question, kind of moving to the practical angle where I do, what would you say to someone on either side to start even just noticing where they might be not balancing or off balance, that not at 12 and 2?
Yeah, it's a challenge because I don't, I'm going to say this and it's going out to the World Wide Web, so here we go. I don't think it's a balance. I used that word earlier, so I'm not correcting you. I think I'm correcting me to some degree. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. Like this whole picture that truth is God. Then you fast forward to James, and he says, "Beloved, love one another. For those who love God, know God, for God is love." So he defines himself as both love and truth. I don't think it's really truth if there is no love. And I don't think it's really love if there is no truth, right?
That's so good, yeah.
So this isn't a balance. This isn't, we got to get on, we got to get on one foot more than the other foot. I think if we think of it that way, you might be thinking you have a choice. You don't have a choice. This isn't a choice. If we're going to be more like Christ, we must make sure that our truth and love are these things that live together, and they're not broken. They're not.
Yeah, they can't be separated.
Can't be separated.
That's kind of a false dichotomy that we're living.
And I think often when we talk balance, it waters down both love and truth. So, I'm sorry, but practically, to answer your question, practically, I think if we approach every conversation critically, there's a really good chance that you're on that side of just where's the love. And then on the flip side, if you're never having tough conversations, there's a really good chance that you're not truly loving, but you kind of feel like you might be. Yeah, it's a. I'm sorry, I'm kind of messed my train of thought up with that original concept there, but
it's a good thought.
Yeah, so I just think from a practical place, like even the way that Jesus navigated this relationship with this woman at the well, it was very personal. It was very he didn't do it with a council of 40 people around him. It was personal. I mean, at any point, one of the rule of thumbs of my life is if you're talking to somebody about somebody else that can't fix the problem, it's gossip, right? So I think that that's a big part of making sure that you're communicating in love, that you're protecting people, whether you're having a conversation with them or anybody else. Like that's a big part of loving people properly. And I would challenge anyone to not fear the sloppy nature of true discipleship and true evangelism. It just gets messy.
Yeah.
It just gets messy, and you got to kind of embrace that. You can't be afraid of it.
Yeah, I love that because I think of Jesus' disciples.
Yeah.
Jesus was Jesus, and it was still messy with the 12 guys closest to him. So it's going to be a messy process.
One of the best pictures of relational confrontation is Jesus and Peter on the boat after the resurrection. And there's this picture where Peter goes back to the thing he knows because he was disappointed in the thing that he thought was going to happen. And Jesus' response to him was, "Do you love me?" Of course, Peter's response is, "Of course I do." And Jesus just quickly, "Well then, feed my sheep." It's just this true picture of, I love you so much that I need to restore you back to what you're intended to do. And I don't have the, I think for a lot of people, I don't have the heart to break bad news. Well, I mean, sometimes good news is that there's healing on the other side of correction.
I know we're getting close to Holy Week, close to Easter, and part of the reason we're talking about Come and See right now is that there's just, God can work in anyone's life at any point. He can just intervene. But something about Easter and inviting people to come and hear the story of a God who loves us so much that he would die for us and then overcomes death and lives again, like that's just really cool. So I just want to challenge you, whether you're part of the Center City family or maybe you are a follower of Jesus anywhere else, like don't miss out on how God may be inviting you to be that person. Like he may just bring you in contact with a neighbor or someone you bump into in line at the grocery store, and that you can invite them to come and see, especially around this time. And
Absolutely.
And we've got, if you're in Charlotte, Center City has Holy Week services happening. We're really excited.
Yeah.
We've got a fancy card.
We do. So Palm Sunday, of course, is April 2nd, and we are excited because we're going to a 9 o'clock and an 11 o'clock experience that gives you 2 chances to come on out, hang out. You can hang out with both, that'd be fun. And then one of our favorite services of the year, Good Friday, April 7th at 7 o'clock, right
PM.
here, PM, yes, right here in our auditorium, which is, it's just a great opportunity to kind of reflect on one of the darkest days in human history that really does lend to the beauty of what happens in Easter. But in order to experience light, you first have to experience dark. And then, of course, Easter Sunday, April 9th, 9 and 11, again, right here. More information, centercity.church/Easter. I'm sure we'll put some stuff in the bio, but or in the description of this video, but we're really excited about it.
Yeah, so we'd love to see you then, and bring a friend.